cycling competition webinar leading up to the cycling competition as part of the 2015 Fall Sports Festival for Special Olympics Maryland, held at Fort Ritchie in Fort Ritchie, Maryland on Saturday, October 24th. So in just about 12 days from now. A couple of precursors for tonight's webinar here. We'll try and keep it fairly quick. A few things to note. A few things to note here. Number one, you're going to get all the presentation materials that we will discuss tonight. Number two, that this webinar is going to be recorded. In a few minutes here, when I give Mike the magic word, we will record the webinar from that moment on, so you can share this webinar with other coaches, family members, athletes, etc. Over the course of the next 12 days, so they will have the same information you will, and it will be shared via YouTube. So tonight's presentation will be video and audio recorded so that we can share that presentation with other athletes and Special Olympics family members here in the next 12 days. So Mike, if we're ready to get started, I'm ready when you are.
Go ahead.
All right, so again, welcome to tonight's cycling competition webinar for the 2015 Fall Sports Festival. The cycling competition will be held at Fort Ritchie, as it was last year successfully, with the great help and support of the friends at the Fort Ritchie Community Center in Fort Ritchie. Again, as I just discussed, tonight's presentation is being recorded, and the presentation materials will be distributed to everyone following tonight's call. The presentation materials that we will cover include the cycling competition event guide. For those of you who are on the webinar portion of the call, on the computer, you'll be able to see this document as we go through it. A couple of things to note. The document is a live document, so if you click somewhere in the document, it will take you to that particular page to assist with navigation of the document. On page 5 of the event guide, you'll find some information on the state cycling competition at Fort Ritchie, including a tentative schedule of events. If this schedule of events were to change, we would notify you via email. The address for Fort Ritchie and the competition venue is listed here on page number 5 as well. And if you click on that particular link, it will take you to driving directions and a link to the Fort Ritchie Community Center to help assist with navigating your way to Fort Ritchie on the day of the competition. As with all of our Special Olympics competitions, athletes are required to train over the course of the training season and compete in qualifiers. For cycling qualifiers, the minimum requirement is 2. One must have been the sanctioned multi-program qualifier, and the other should have been a sanctioned in-house qualifier. If we were to experience inclement weather on the day of the competition, races will be delayed until the weather brings more favorable racing conditions. And if in the event the inclement weather does not clear, certain events may be canceled, and the competition director, who is myself, along with Tracy Lee, who is also on the call, and we'll get to Tracy here in a minute, Tracy and myself have the final decision in regards to inclement weather decisions. In regards to medical services, we'll have medical personnel on site as well as an ambulance on site as well to assist with any particular medical needs that our athletes or spectators or coaches may have during the event. And again, we'll have an ambulance on site in case there is a specific injury or need that where we would have to transport a athlete, coach, partner, etc. to a medical facility. We'll have that available as well. Results and awards, we'll get to that here in a second and show you exactly where we're going to have those. The setup of the competition venue will be pretty much identical to last year, one minor change. We'll have the results posted on the side of the trailer, which will be at the start-finish line. We'll get to that in a minute. And the awards will take place in the awards ceremonies tent, which will again be on the grass adjacent to the start-finish line. That tent is where we will also do lunches. And we'll have a small family hospitality area in there as well. On page number 7 of the document that you're seeing now on the screen, you will see that we have an overhead shot of the facility. If you are a spectator or a family member, you're not dropping off a bike or a bike trailer or a van that houses bikes, we'll ask you to continue straight as you enter the facility down Varick Avenue. Make the right, and you'll park in the same parking field, that we utilized last year. The only change in our venue is that we've moved the staging and trailer parking zone closer to the start-finish line, just next to the turn, the final turn heading up to the start-finish line. So again, that will just be for bike drop-off, bike storage, trailer storage, and if you have a large van that's housing several bikes, we'll be able to assist you in parking it there in the spot that you see here on the screen, located at the X or the D. Once you have dropped off your trailer or you have dropped off your bikes, unless you need to keep it there for a specific reason, we'll ask you to move your vehicle then around to parking area B here listed on this map. The next page here of the document is just a zoomed-in view, which will give you a better idea of the race course, as well as the surroundings here of what the facility will look like that we're going to use for the event. Again, you'll see the parking area clearly defined there in the grass at the bottom left of your screen, and at the top right of your screen, you will see marked as C. That is where we will have the bike staging area for this year's event. You'll also see the officials tent, registration and results tent, the staging area, the ceremony and lunch tent, as well as the start-finish line and the restrooms, where we will have portable restrooms as well as use of the indoor restrooms facility in the building located just next to the tent. The yellow dotted line signifies the race course. The race course is the same as last year. One lap around the race course is approximately 1 kilometer. And the race course will be competed in a clockwise motion. Tracy, anything that you would like to add in regards to the cycling venue itself?
No, except that I think, I think mostly, I apologize for the buzz on the line. We have been having trouble with birds and squirrels and whatever other wildlife that lives in Carroll County living in our phone lines. Now maybe it's cleared up again. Bird left. I think everybody saw that it's pretty wide open, so, really in terms of temperature, because it is wide open, winds can be an issue like last year. So that can affect the clothing and the dress for everybody. But I think just on that piece, I don't know. It's a really straightforward, big, wide open course, and for those who race Sykesville, there's no hills on this one.
Very good. Tracy, the next several pages of the document here on the screen go over rules, which I'm sure most of our coaches and people on the call know. And if you have any specific rules questions, you can probably find an answer here in the document. But rather than go through the rules one by one, etc., if anybody has any specific rules questions or uniform questions or equipment questions regarding the state competition, now would be an appropriate time.
Let's go back, Tommy. Let's go back to the slide before where it shows the race numbers.
Yeah.
I had a sample at Sykesville, but look at the one that's best. And, I know some of the coaches, when they hear terminology on the side, it ends up being, somewhere wrapped around the rib cage. So pay attention to where that number is, what says best, and, look at that piece because that's what we'll be wanting again. And now we do have chip timing, so this is just secondary, but it's still optimal to have better number placement.
Right. And Tracy, later on in the slides here and in the document, I will actually go over what we talked about earlier in regards to the bids.
Yep.
So, any other specific points, Tracy, in regards to uniforms, equipment, rules that you'd like to cover at this time?
One thing on the uniform is for the counties or the athletes who are using T-shirts, I encourage you to get your athletes to tuck those T-shirts in, because sometimes, depending on how they get on and off their bike, you actually can get stuck on your saddle with a T-shirt. I'm hoping that as we progress over the next year that we don't have any more T-shirts. Everybody's in cycling clothes. And, you know, if it's cold, then of course that's an issue in terms of their jackets. But one of the ways you can help the athletes be a little less bundled up with heavy jackets if it's chilly is to pay attention to what they're wearing underneath their cycling jersey and what's on their arms. So you can, you know, there's athletic T-shirts that go underneath it. Cotton T-shirts are just about the worst thing in the world and provide absolutely nothing. So your athletes will have better performances if they're not bulked up. And if they can stay warm, that's the time to keep them really bulky and super warm, so they're starting, you know, okay, and their core temperature is up, then they won't have to race with as many clothes on. I think that's good, Tommy.
Yep. Tracy, anything in regards to equipment or mechanical assistance and breakdowns?
Equipment, I think we've been down to everybody, you know. We don't check bicycles. That's up to your responsibility. Each coach has to be sure each bike has 2 working brakes. And, you know, we've been down this road before for bikes that are slightly on the more bizarre side. As long as someone like Chris Metello or somebody else has signed off that it's safe, then, you know, we're good to go with it. We want to be flexible and be able to accommodate the various disabilities. Again, just reminding everybody that you can assist an athlete who does have a mechanical breakdown. So I encourage, you know, for some of your athletes maybe who are on higher performing bikes, you know, you can actually even have spare wheels to get them, so you can actually get them up and running quicker. And be sure to bring your own spare tubes and your pump, because some of your athletes are running on Presta, some of you are on Schrader valves, so you want to be sure that's connected. The one thing I would like to point out, and use the buddy system, is at Sykesville I saw a lot of ill-fitting and ill-connected helmets, and that is one that I'm going to be really kind of a stickler on, because at this point everybody's helmets should be squarely over their foreheads and securely connected. And for athletes with longer hair, to work with them on, you know, pulling it back so it can be sitting properly on their heads. But let's work on having everybody with, you know, good helmets. So I think that's the main one on that.
Okay. The next slide here on page 14 of the document covers time trials and road races and the difference between the two. I believe everybody knows the difference, but Tracy, anything you want to touch on?
I think everybody knows what we're doing. We do fastest to slowest. You know, in terms of the coach's responsibility, you know, you'll have the start list, you'll have the approximate time that we'll be starting, but again, we just keep rolling, so we could catch up. We might look like we're behind, and then we can catch up, so pay attention. It's totally your responsibility to have the athletes, you know, aligned, because if they miss their start, you know, it's just the question is whether we can do a start at the end of the line. We want to accommodate, but again, you know, we need to have the athletes there. I mean, I think you guys have all been awesome. You know, you've been down how we've set up the waves, and again, sometimes I'm a little conservative on how many divisions will start on the course at the same time, and then I start seeing how it's run. I saw, you know, last year at Fort Ritchie, that course can accommodate a fair number of riders on a course at the same time, so I think won't be quite as conservative, but again, you know, we could play catch up and move people forward. So, you know, you just need to be paying attention. You'll see that in your start sheets, what your waves are, but again, we could potentially move people up into a different start wave. that's all good.
Very good. Tracy, anything you want to touch on in regards to permissible coaching?
The only thing, absolutely everything is permissible in cycling other than following your cyclist on a bike. So if you want to ride your bike to get to the backside of the course, or you have somebody who wants to ride a bike to the backside of the course, we ask you to be dismounted at the time that the racing is going on. So I don't expect everybody to have to walk to the back if they don't want to, but that's the big no-no, is no coaching from the bike.
Very good. Thanks, Tracy. The next part of the document, the next part of the presentation here, we'll go over some registration and some delegation information in regards to the competition itself. So the delegation registration will take place in the registration tent. That will be next to the big giant lunch tent that we'll have. You can find that here on pages 7 and 8. If we have anybody who's late, and so late that they miss their competition, unless we have an extreme or exceptional circumstance, unfortunately, we won't have time to make up any races, so that athlete would be eliminated from the competition. If for some reason you hit traffic, or you have an issue where there's a flat tire or something extreme, or some extenuating circumstance, please be forward, think forward, pick up the phone, call myself, call Mike Zarnowski, call Tracy Lee, give us a heads up, call someone else who is at the venue already, so they can let us know. All athletes, coaches, partners, etc. will have credentials. The credentials will be separate from the bibs, two separate things. And unless your athlete is on a bicycle, we'll ask you to have make sure that all the athletes and folks in your delegation have their credential on at all times. And that way we can easily identify people, get them into the awards tent, get them to their bikes, etc., so that we can move the competition along. In regards to the race bibs, when your coach or your head of delegation comes and checks in on Saturday morning they're going to receive a packet, and the packet will have a copy of this document. It'll have some maps of the venue. It'll have the heat sheets and the competition divisions, etc. And it'll also have the race bibs for all of your cyclists' first race. Okay? Each race bib is going to have a timing chip attached to it, and that'll already be taken care of. If you have an athlete who's competing in a second event later on in the day, they need to bring the first race bib back and exchange it for a new one at the control center there, or at the registration table. And you can do that, or the coach or the athlete can do that, but you need to exchange the race bib for a new race bib for every athlete who's competing in a second race later on in the day.
And I'll weigh in here that,
sure.
Yeah, so if someone shows up with their first number on, there's a high probability, and we don't catch it when we're looking at the numbers, that that rider will essentially not get scored or timed properly. So it'll end up being, a DNF type of thing. We might be able to get the right time and placing manually. So I just can't stress the importance of being sure to follow up. And those of you who are at Sykesville did a great job of, no ticky, no shirty, come and get that second race number. That's really super important. And then also, depending on what chip we are, it's not to have athletes who are finished to go back underneath where the chip is, that they need to be circling around, and you'll see some, because what we just don't know how to do is once the chip just starts chirping away at our poor timer, they kind of go berserk.
Thanks, Tracy. At 9 o'clock on the competition day, we'll have an opening ceremony. So we're going to start calling everybody together for the opening ceremony about 8:30, 8:45 to the large tent located next to the start-finish line. We'll have a national anthem. We'll have the athlete oath, etc. But we'll have a nice little ceremony there. We'll thank the folks from Fort Ritchie, as well as our folks from Racine Multisports who are assisting us with the chip timing and the competition venue setup, etc. So please encourage everybody to be there early and participate in that ceremony at 9 o'clock. Here on the page, you'll also see a link for an evaluation survey. If you click on that link, that's a live link again, you can go there and give us some feedback on the event, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you thought went well, what you thought could be improved upon. The only way we can help improve the competition venues for our athletes and the competition experience for the athletes is with good, positive feedback. So if you go and you participate and you encourage your athletes and family members to go and participate in that survey, certainly we'd like their opinion, but remember that, help us provide feedback that's constructive or positive so that we can improve the experience for the athletes as a whole. Susan Holland, our family coordinator for Special Olympics Maryland, will be on site as her daughter Desiree is competing in the cycling competition. Susan will be, I would say manning, but she'll be womaning the family registration table from 8:30 to 2 on the competition day. She'll have family information, light refreshments for families, etc. There is not lunch available on site for family members. So again, lunches. We have a certain amount of lunches that are going to be delivered that are for the delegations only. Again, for the registered delegations only. Okay? If you have a family or spectators or someone who is coming who is not a part of your official delegation, we need to either have them plan ahead, bring some stuff with them, or Susan will have a list of local restaurants, shops, etc. That being said, if you've been to Fort Ritchie last year, there's one pizza place across the street, and I think we probably gave them their busiest day of the year last year. So plan ahead, bring some food for your family members, spectators. The closest place to probably get some food is about 15 minutes away. So again, lunch is not provided or for sale for family members, so please pass the word around and keep that in mind as we get closer to the event.
And I also want to talk about food for the athletes because, you've all been on the road. Many of you will be on the road. Athletes will have had breakfast hours and hours and hours before they race. So, you hear me, this is my mantra, my rant, is to be sure the athletes have the appropriate snack an hour or so before the start of their race. So for many of them, it's kind of when they're arriving. And then, pay attention to their eating and their lunch relative to when their next competition is. So in other words, you don't want them a half an hour before their next race to be gobbling down their big sub or, handful of potato chips and all that kinds of stuff. So, you wouldn't want to go running and doing exercise with a belly full. We need to pay attention and do what's best for our athletes to have them have the optimal performance. And, I think you all kind of know some good foods to bring. You can bring, pasta salads without dressing, so you don't have to worry about it keeping it cold, and you can just put some on. You can have some rice cakes that are good to bring, bananas, Fig Newtons are awesome, and of course your sports bars. So I encourage having lots of good snacks and, save for the heavier mealtime, when it's an hour and a half or 2 hours before their competition, and maybe they even save their lunch for later. Light peanut butter and jelly is good. So lunches are good, but maybe not exactly during competition. And coffee for the coaches, by the way. Again, Tommy, since there isn't much around, I don't think there was hot coffee on site for the coaches. And
there is not. We don't really have that luxury given the location. So plan ahead. Again, spread the word. Plan ahead. The Fort Ritchie Community Center at the main entrance, I believe they have a snack bar, but I don't think it's going to be open the day of the competition. And I also don't know what they have or don't have inside there. So better safe than sorry. Plan ahead. Bring as much as you can. You can bring whatever you'd like to the facility. Obviously, clean up after your delegation with the trash and stuff. But plan ahead. We'll have water for the athletes and water for spectators. But again, plan ahead as far as snacks and extra drinks and extra food for anybody else who's coming.
And if it's going to be cold, if you can get some big thermoses of some, hot chicken and rice soup or something like that, so your athletes can have some hot beverages while on site, it's really, really good. And I think you guys as coaches would love it too. We were lucky last year, but we all know what the end of October can be. We've seen some pretty rough fall games. And Tommy, I guess you want to speak to this rain or shine, is normally how cycling goes, and I think most of the sports do. Lightning would be the only thing that would stop it. That's an all-weather course, and the athletes really showed how awesome they handled the rain at Sykesville. So I think, people shouldn't be afraid. They just need to be properly clothed. And if it is going to be a rainy day, what I suggest is multiple sets of clothes if possible, so they can get out of their wet clothes in between their first and their second race. They get into their street clothes and then have dry cycling clothes to put on for the next round. Staying dry at post-athletic competition is really key to not getting the core cold.
Good stuff. Thanks, Tracy.
Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong also, and I apologize if you already touched on this, but delegations, groups can bring pop-up tents and such and use part of the space in the either the parade field or near there to set up their own little area.
Whatever they'd like. You can bring your chairs, pop-up tents, whatever you'd like to bring to set up shop for the day, please feel free.
Yeah, make yourself comfortable.
As we move in through the rest of the document here, the next couple pages, we'll go over ahead.
Tom, one last thing on clothes I forgot.
Sure.
Is please, again, the athletes will have been in many of them. If you can possibly time-wise arrange it, since the athletes, many of them are getting picked up at 6 in the morning, they should come in their street clothes, not in chamois. And so just plan on, you can use the bathroom facilities or a towel or something so they can get into their chamois. And then be sure they're changing out of their chamois post-competition for their drive home. It's definitely not a healthy thing to be in chamois for 12 hours.
Thanks, Tracy. Moving forward here, the rest of the document with a couple things. The head of delegation responsibilities, head coach responsibilities are listed here on page 19 and page 20. Page 21 outlines the protest procedures. Only an athlete-certified head coach from a delegation can file a protest on the athlete's behalf. No protest will be accepted from anyone else except by the certified head coach. Protests can only be made on the application of sports rules and not the judgment of officials. Protests can be filed via the protest form, which will be in the registration/head of delegation packet that the head of delegation will get at check-in. And they can turn those protest forms, if you have any, into the control center, and the Sports Rules Committee will rule on each protest. The Sports Rules or Games Rules Committee consists of myself, Tracy Lee, and Adam Hayes, who is an athlete who specializes in Maryland Frederick County, who is unfortunately unable to compete this year due to an injury. But Adam will join us on that committee as well. The rest of the document here goes over some medical information, a health preparation checklist, some common medical problems that our athletes face in competitions and events, information on concussions, and the signs and potential symptoms of concussions are listed here on page 26 via the live link. Emergency medical procedures and lost and found information are found here in the document, as well as the codes of conduct for athletes, coaches, and volunteers, as well as the code of conduct infractions list and steps are listed here on page 32 and 33. Information on protecting Special Olympics athletes is also here in the document, including how to prevent physical abuse, preventing emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and what to do if you see any signs or have any allegations of these types of abuse. Page 38 and 39 are very important.
Can I just jump right 1 second in on going back to the concussion and the headpiece
Sure.
relative to cycling? One of our officials, Jack Poplar, has led our cycling community in the head injury issue, and if an athlete falls, he's going to inspect that helmet, and if that helmet has a crack in it, that athlete will not be allowed for sure to use that helmet, and I would say most likely not be allowed to continue the next competition because of the force of the fall itself, even though potentially it's not a concussion. So I just want to let you know that he's very strict, and he's strict for all of our athletes, for all of our protection. So just know that, you know, he will look, there will be an inspection of that helmet.
And again, we'll have trained medical professionals on site at the event to assist with that as well. Thanks, Tracy. Pages 38 and 39 are very important. They provide the facility address, which includes an address that you can plug into a GPS, or you can click here on the live link on the page, and it will take you straight to Google Maps, where you can input directions from wherever you're coming from that day to help get you to Fort Ritchie. There's also some driving directions that are already pre-printed here from various places around the state. On page 39, there's 2 live links, which will help you get, if you need to go from Fort Ritchie to Mount St. Mary's University and see pieces of the Fall Sports Festival at the Mount, or vice versa. So if you click on one of those, it will take you, as it says, to driving directions from the Mount to Fort Ritchie, or vice versa. At this time, we'll open up the floor to any questions that anyone else may have in regards to the cycling competition at Fort Ritchie for either myself, Mike Zarnowski, or Tracy Lee. And again, if you hit, Mike, I believe it's *6. Most folks may have hit to mute their line. If you'd like to unmute your line, you might have to hit *6 again to unmute your line.
Yeah, that is correct. It is *6.
So, any questions? Okay. If we don't have any questions on the documents and information that was covered here tonight, we'll go ahead and wrap up tonight's call. Mike Zarnowski and myself, we will distribute the majority of the competition information for not only the cycling competition, but for the rest of the Fall Sports Festival here over the course of the next week. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, well, probably divisions and such probably won't come out until early next week.
Yeah, so within about the next week or so, we will distribute the final competition information for the cycling competition. And if you're a coach or have an athlete that's competing in a different event at the Fall Sports Festival, that information will be coming here very shortly too. So again, if you've joined us on tonight's call, you're going to get emailed this presentation material within the next 24 hours, and we'll also have a link where you'll be able to go back and watch this presentation and watch this webinar on YouTube and share that with your athletes, coaches, parents, etc.
I'm sorry, this is Margie Young from Montgomery County. Are you guys going to send us heat sheets through email so that we can just, get our own copies so that you guys don't have to make so many copies?
Yes.
Margie, we'll do that, and then we'll also have copies on site too. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Also, Jim Russell, could you stay on the call after we wrap for just a moment? I have a registration question to cover with you.
Sure will.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, thanks for joining us here this evening. We appreciate your time and support of Special Olympics cycling. We look forward to seeing you on next Saturday, the 24th, at Fort Ritchie. So best of luck to everybody, and have a great 12 days.
Great. Thanks, Tony.